This video contains gratuitous use of profanity and uncomfortable pauses to compensate for lack of professionalism and original thought. Viewer discretion advised.
Coming to you live from Snake Mountain, we proudly bring to you the Nerdy Manroom show with your host, Hassel and Monster. And as you can see, Monster is still hidden behind the veil. It is just my face you get to look at, unfortunately.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get it fixed in the next week. I'm waiting on the Televipers to show up. They're always behind schedule.
Them rascals.
You know, half of them are probably captured by G.I. Joe at this point, so it's just a matter of them actually showing up. But you know,
good help's hard to find these days.
Yeah, hopefully they'll get here and get that fixed. But in the meantime, we do have a fantastic show today. We're going to focus on Masters of the Universe. We did say we were going to do Ninja Turtles, and then we realized afterwards that we actually did that show already. So we swapped up to Masters of the Universe because we haven't done that. But before we get into it, let's thank our sponsors. These Zone Collectibles. You can find them on the internet at thezonecollectibles@gmail.com and on Facebook at These Zone Collectibles or in their store at 305 Main Street, Tifton, Georgia. Visit them for all your nerdy needs, from comics to Legos, trading cards, games, toys, and more. Help them support the local artist community by supporting their cause of bringing unity through community. Fandoms unite. And with that, let's go straight into the focus this week. Like we said, we were going to talk about Masters of the Universe. Let's give a quick history of a very short, abbreviated history of what they are. So, in 1976, Mattel was struggling to come up with a new toy line. They were losing market share, particularly in the action figure market, as they passed on Star Wars. They didn't want to do that toy line, thought that was going to be a failure, and Kenner was blowing them out of the water. So they started working on a new concept, and they struggled for a while. Finally, in the 78, I believe it was, maybe even 79, they came up with the idea for Masters of the Universe. A lot of it based on sorcery as well as technology, and there was a lot of inspiration from Conan the Barbarian. And we can't overlook that fact, but you know, there's always been that.
The very first figure or sketch is very, very Conan-esque.
Yeah, and there's always that debate of, you know, did they steal ideas from Conan? Because I think they were working on getting licensing to do Conan products at the time. So people are like, did you take that and turn that into Masters? And there's they swear up and down they didn't, and a lot of the stuff wasn't. I mean, honestly, like Battle Cat was actually from their toy line Big Jim, which was their action adventure toy line, and they actually just repainted him green and stuck some armor on him. So you know, some things weren't, but He-Man was pretty close to it. But what
was the original deal? I kind of forgot what it was. The issue with the licensing for Conan, that was why they changed gears and didn't.
I don't know if they ever fully
what did it do with the violence or something like that?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly what it was. I know that they pulled. I know that the owners of Conan pulled out of the deal for whatever reason. For whatever reason, Mattel wasn't wanting to do it. But at the same time, they released Masters of the Universe right around the time they were working on that. So the question was, did you really ever intend to do Conan, or did you just want to steal it and put it as your own property? Because if it's Conan, they only get a certain amount of the money back, right? But if He-Man's homegrown product, all of it's theirs. So,
and what's crazy now is Conan as a free range property. Anyone can do Conan now, because the way the rights fell after the 100 years or whatever the hell it was.
Yeah, and you know, with it not following Conan and not being, you know, the Conan stories or the comics there, the big question was, how were they going to make Masters of the Universe and He-Man work without a way to tell the story? So they did mini comics in with the figures for the first few waves of figures, and then they went to DC and started the comics. So I think the comics were 81 and 82, honestly, and the figures started coming out in 82 as well. But we didn't get the TV series, which is what most of us remember He-Man by, until 1983. So they'd already been in production run for a year or so at that point.
But what a boom when that show kicked off. I mean, you
Dude,
got a 30-minute commercial.
and the whole thing was they didn't think they could do that because the FCC rulings at the time that you could not market a show towards kids that had any kind of property out there that they could buy. So this was like the first. This was the first TV show after the rulings changed that could happen, that you could market the entire show. And now they were required to include the PSA, which we saw every show do, but still it was a 30-minute cartoon to basically market buying and selling the toys, which is, I'll be honest, that's what got me into it because I had seen them before. I'm assuming just it's hard to remember because it's so long ago and I was really young, but I don't remember anything before the cartoon and the toys together. I mean, I remember having He-Man and Battle Cat and watching it on TV at the same time, but I don't recall just being enamored with it until it was on the TV.
I vaguely remember that being my foray into it was the show, and Mom thankfully was a Conan fan, and it was enough like Conan to where she would sit and watch it with me. My grandparents would watch it with me, and then before long, it was like, okay, he's really into this. He has to have them all. And thankfully between my, grandparents, my great aunt and my mom, I pretty much did have them all. My dad, he got me Snake Mountain one year.
Same thing. I had a ton of them. I didn't have Snake Mountain. I had Castle Grayskull, but I had a ton of the figures. And then honestly, for me, at least the impact of this show was this was the first one that was really like okay, you're giving me a show with superheroes and then I've got toys to play with. Like the Super Friends had been on TV longer. I mean, they'd been since the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
But, you didn't really have those 3 3/4 inch Kenner Superpowers figures until after He-Man and stuff. And, He-Man, I could watch the show and then I could play with the toys at the same time. So that was the big impact on me, is that this is the first thing that I can really get into like this and build upon it and do more with it. And, the show honestly had a bunch of episodes. I think they had a season of like 60 episodes, but they only had 2 seasons. It only lasted from 83 to 85 for the show. In 85 when they.
But I mean, if you have 2 seasons of 60 episodes apiece, that's 120 episodes. That's more than far. I mean, all they had to do was reach syndication, and then they had accomplished their goal anyways.
Oh yeah. I mean, they got their worth out of it, but it's hard to believe that with all the figures and stuff that we got, and some of them never even made the show. Honestly, they were actually put out after the show was ending, but. You had from 83 to 85, and then in 85 to 87, you had She-Ra, which picked up and brought He-Man back in a few different times for different episodes. But and I consider them the same universe when I look at all of it because it was all one thing, even though it was 2 separate shows. That basically it ran from, if you put them together, 83 to 87, and then it just died off until like 1990 when they tried to bring it back, which was so unsuccessful. But
Ooh.
So I guess with that, being a short history of it, before we jump into some of it, you want to talk about the characters first, or you want to talk about the different shows first?
Well, we can do a brief gloss over the shows since we're already on the shows, and then we delve into the characters.
Yeah, so I will say for me, as much as I love those, and I have the box sets of the DVDs of both He-Man and She-Ra and all their movies and stuff. The only one that I really remember standing out that much, as far as like remember a whole episode or something, is 2 things. It's the He-Man and She-Ra movie, which introduced She-Ra, the Secret of the Sword, and the Christmas special, because I still watch that every year for Christmas. But beyond those, I don't remember honestly lots of the shows.
I don't remember ever watching the Christmas special. I know I had, but literally about a week back. The gremlin was in the floor playing, and he had like some He-Man down there he was playing with it. I've got him. And I just was like thumbing through Tubi, which is, anyone that doesn't have Tubi, you're doing yourself huge disservice. It is free as fuck. You sign into it and you can pick back up. I mean, it's got Transformers, G.I. Joe, He-Man, and they had the Christmas special on there. Yeah. So I was like, you know what? I'll cut this on. Maybe it'll be something he likes. And he sat there enamored with it. And I was like, this is still pretty enjoyable,
There's so many animations. So that was done by Filmation, and all the voice acting was in house with Lou Scheimer, Alan Oppenheimer, all the folks who worked there already, because they did all their shows together like that. But their animation style was so, I don't want to call it cheap, but they did it cheaply by reusing the same, like He-Man, that same punching scene from He-Man punching is used 100 times and across every episode.
Yeah.
But it still fit the show so well because the way they did the backgrounds is like you never knew what was going on outside of that punch, so you could just constantly reuse it.
You just crop and then paste into each background.
And I think they were more, them and Scooby Doo are the ones I remember the most, that where you knew if you looked at the background of the screen, the background was a different color. The main stuff that was happening was a brighter pop. And then you knew if there was something like a secret passage or something that you had to pull a book out like in Scooby Doo to open the bookcase. It was so much brighter. And it was so much brighter than the rest of the background. Like everything.
Yeah.
And they did the same thing, but their stuff just popped to me for whatever reason. Like the animation stuff, and they were so smooth looking with their characters and the movements and stuff. It wasn't very jerky, but you knew that the background was done one way and everybody else in the front was the actual animation. So it stood out, but I enjoyed it. I mean, even today, I'll still pick up and watch them if I had. I just don't remember the plots of many episodes.
Some episodes hold up. Yeah, some episodes hold up a little better than others because I've rewatched a few with him, and some just hold up really well. And some of them was like, "Ooh, this is terrible. It's real bad." So
we had that, and then we had She-Ra, which was really just a direct sequel to He-Man, honestly. And honestly, a lot of the characters that were made for, even though they marketed the toys in different packaging, trying to get the girls versus the boys, and both of them buying, there were times when a character was made strictly for He-Man, but the show had already ended, so he never showed up on He-Man. Like, I'll use Snout Spout as an example.
Yeah.
He was in a Masters of the Universe card, but he was actually created for that, but he actually only showed up on She-Ra's show. And he only had like one or two guest appearances, and I don't even know if he had any speaking lines, but when he showed up on there, and then you look back and actually read his origin for how they wrote the origin, I think He-Man at some point was meant to continue on because he and two or three others were created by the Horde Empire, like kidnapped from Eternia and created to be characters by the Horde Empire, and then actually turned good and joined the Masters versus joining the Horde. But they kept that crossover material there.
Yeah, I think they hoped that She-Ra would re-spark the interest in He-Man to bring that back and continue it on and the strength or whatnot. But
yeah, because in 85-ish, 86-ish is when they started to drop in sales of the toys, honestly. And I don't remember all the statistics on that, and I wasn't going to look them up for this conversation. But, a lot of times I will, but that's when they started to drop off at that point.
And I wasn't super big on She-Ra, but she had some of the cooler villains, I will say, because, I mean, I love Hordak. He's like one of my favorites. He's so just badass, when you take him out of the... I mean, they camped him up a whole lot for, She-Ra because it's geared towards girls. But he had some cool moments. He had a little bit more of a Freddy Krueger vibe to him versus where, the way they portrayed Skeletor at the time, he was a little step ahead of the bumbling fool that the others were.
Yes, and he had some cool henchmen too. And I will say there was not a lot of She-Ra hero characters I was really into, and I've always been more of a hero versus a villain person. Now, I will say though that we didn't do a top 10 list this week of our characters. Maybe we'll do that another time. But we did say let's pick some favorite ones and just kind of banter around about them. And I will tell you that I did take She-Ra out of that and say she's one of my favorites because I really did enjoy her. I liked the way they did her character, and she was kind of probably being a young boy. You don't get that excited a lot of times about the female characters on there.
Yeah.
At least for I didn't, but she was one that I did. She was like probably the first one that I was like, okay. I mean, before even over Wonder Woman or anybody else, I was like, She-Ra is the cool one. I liked her.
Dude, I'll be honest. I guess because of the colors, the bright colors of the nature of this, and all of the female characters that were the heroines with her, they just, to me, I attribute them more as Jim and the Hologram knockoffs back then. Cause I looked at them and was like, man, Jim's cool. Jim's cooler than they are, But you had Hordak, so I was like, I could watch it.
So if we say we've got the He-Man and She-Ra cartoons there, and we just lumped them together as one. When He-Man went and She-Ra both went out in 87, it was not until 1990 when they actually tried to revive them with New Adventures of He-Man, which
space was bullshit is what I call that.
Yes, and so we will come back in a minute and actually rank these shows, I think, between the two of us. But let's talk through all of them first. Like New Adventures, I was not a huge fan of. I really don't remember much of the plots. Now it is on Peacock if you want to watch it somewhere. And I have tried to watch a little bit of it, and it was rough to watch. The only good thing I got out of it was that Adam finally told his parents that he was He-Man. beyond
But
that,
wasn't he technically not the same Adam, not the same He-Man, and or Skeletor? They're like in the future or some crap like that.
they go to the future, to a different planet to help out, but it's still the same characters. It's still the same ones.
Okay.
It's just they get sucked into the future, or He-Man volunteers to go. Skeletor tags along and tries to cause more trouble. But
okay, it's a little different than I thought. Then
Yeah.
for some reason, I vaguely remembered it like I knew it was in the future, but I thought for some reason I was thinking it was a deal where it really wasn't the same characters. Kind of like Beast Wars, where it, you know.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but it is actually the same Skeletor and He-Man, but nobody else from the show goes along to the future. So you after the first 2 episodes, I think you lose all the rest of the classic characters.
Oh, wow.
Maybe Sorceress might speak to it. I can't remember, but I know the rest of the characters are gone after like the first 2 episodes. And it's just He-Man, Skeletor, and then all the new characters.
Didn't the sword of power almost like a little lightsaber?
Yes, it did. They were trying to go back and. What's funny is that I didn't realize this, but if you go online and look at some different forums, there's a lot of people who will say that it's like Dragon Ball. So if you watch Dragon Ball Z, GT, and then Super, everybody says GT was not canon because it goes Z and then Super, and GT everybody wants to forget about. They want to treat this He-Man like that and say that the actual follow-up to this was the one that was never produced. So Lou Scheimer actually wrote a script for a new show of Hero, son of He-Man, that would have had He-Man as King He-Man. His son Dare would have been Hero 2, based off Hero being the one who had the original power staff stuff. So he actually wrote an entire script for I don't know if it was the first whole season or if it was at least the introductory part of the season, maybe the first 2 to 5 episodes. He wrote all that, but it never got picked up to be made because it was actually done in '95, and this version of He-Man had already failed. And they're like, "Yeah, no, we're not going back to that well. That well's drained dry at this point."
But you know what? I would have watched that. That actually sounds pretty interesting. But let's be honest, they really didn't strike gold again until what, 02?
Yeah, the 2000.
And to me, that's the best one of the
series. All of them.
It was 02. I had to look it up the other day.
Okay, I thought it was 2000. I know it was 2000, but I thought it was 2010 for whatever reason.
But it was still kicking in 2010. But as far as like the toys,
toys, yeah, and that show was 2002. You were right. I was looking at that. Now I actually have that on DVD, and I will say that I didn't like the Power Sword in that one. I did like how Adam actually looked much different, other than getting a suntan when he did the power. But you got to admit, you mean
instead of looking like this?
But you got to admit,
not a fan of that.
In the old show, even though all he got was a suntan, that lightning blast had to tan him a little bit, man, because that was some strong lightning to hit every time he transformed. It had to give him a little bit of a tan.
Bro had that Soul Glow tan. I will give him that. He was rocking it.
I did like the transformation. I was not a fan of the voice acting in that show necessarily, at least not for Adam and He-Man.
Some was hit and miss. You had some that was really good.
Like Stratos was great. The voice for Stratos, sounding like Sean Connery, that fit so well. But
certain ones was very good. I liked the Man at Arms. Overall, the storytelling was really good.
The storytelling is what was so much better because it actually
they made
into the origins of Eternia and He-Man and Skeletor, and they gave it more backstory than the old show ever gave it.
Yeah, that was the first time you really got a delve into Keldor and all of that. And then they made the Snake Man cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I dug it.
Well, I'm going to be honest. If we were looking at the villains of the shows, or the toy line, because they weren't in the original show, but the Snake Men were so much better to me. Cobra Khan was the only Snake Man I remember in the original show, but
Tongue Lasher, and I just remember the figure being super cool because he was purple.
Yeah,
2 shades of purple, and he was really buff, and then he had the tongue. I just remember like being a kid and that just being such a cool figure to me.
He was a cool figure. I thought the Snake Men were better villains overall. I just liked them better. I thought they were much better bad guys for them. But you don't really get much of that story until you get to that 2002 show, and that show was great with giving you backstory of all the characters of King Grayskull and He-Man himself and Hero and everybody else, and it delved into it more and gave you more of a history of it. The one thing that I think that they never did, even with it though, and same with the original show, is they never explained how you had so much technology, so advanced technology, and magic working at the same time.
These are 2 things that are hard to have hand in hand in most fantasy universes.
Most storylines and sci-fi stories, it's either one or the other, right? You don't get both of them usually, but for some reason in He-Man, you got both. The only other thing I remember
you didn't get the technology until the people abandoned the faith into the magic.
The only show that I remember that had a better blend of that was Visionaries, because Visionaries, you had to use all the technology on that planet was actually destroyed because of a solar flare that was an EMP that burnt out everything. The only way you could use technology and vehicles in that show was that you had to harness your magic powers and learn your magic, and that powered the vehicle. That was the only one I thought was like, okay, that's more in depth than He-Man was with it. He-Man, you just had both, but they never really explained it.
He would hold aloft his magic sword, or just fly upon his sky sled. Just saying. And yes, that is the Gremlins toy. I got to play with it, so I'm pretty happy. The
origin was. I didn't bring it up here because my camera's still not working.
With
but I have
the sword.
I actually have the original He-Man sitting on Battle Cat right behind me.
Oh, okay.
Now the sword is not the original. I have the blue sword, which was the one that came in the weapons pack. It's not the silver one that came with him because I lost it. But I still have my original He-Man and Battle Cat, and they're sitting on the shelf behind me.
I do not. My cousins, Casey and Jake, they were bequeathed, unbeknownst to me, my He-Man, G.I. Joe, Transformers, all of the OG cool shit. And I just came home. I was like 15 or 16. I came home and I got looking around and I was like, Mimi, where are my toys at? And she said, but baby, you too old for toys. No. Let me stop you. Where is my shit? Because I didn't say that to Myrtle because she'd have slapped me. But still, I was like, where's my stuff? And then she told me that she gave it to my cousins. Not happy. Not a happy day.
Yeah, the only... I know we're still on the show, but I'm going to give my one complaint with the He-Man toys is that they never looked like they did on the show because they were based off the comic drawings and the original sketch designs. Like even the later ones, they still didn't look like they don't, because the show has such a smooth look to it, and these figures look more realistic, like the way their armor fit or was like strap around the wrist thing. And I was like, man, I want it to look just like the show. That was my only complaint, but I still love it.
You want a He-Man to have the little bracelets and not actually a very detailed look.
Yeah,
like we got.
So that we've been through all the shows now except for Revelations.
I like Revelations. Well, the second half of Revelations. The first one where you only get He-Man in 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
That was a little hard to stomach, but I will say as a sequel to the original show, this was probably the truest sequel out of any of the shows, because the 2000 series was a reboot. It wasn't a sequel, and the New Adventures of He-Man let's be honest, it's forgettable.
Yes, very.
I don't really have a whole lot to say about it. I mean, Revelations has been either applauded or dogged pretty badly, depending on your viewpoint of it. So I really don't have a lot to say. I mean, I enjoyed it, but I
as
don't
a fan, from my point of
in.
view, like my fiance, she watched it with me. Like we watched it together. She didn't grow up on He-Man, so she found the entire series super enjoyable. Like, is there another episode? Is there another episode? I was like, yeah. So we kept watching. And then when we got through with the first half of the season, she's like, oh, what the hell? You know, but to where I, as a fanboy, I was like, man, they killed my boy off in the first episode. What the world?
Yeah.
And then you don't even get an inkling of him returning until the tail end of the last episode. And then he gets killed, you think, seemingly. And it's like, whoa. But then, had they not got that second half out as fast as they did, Kevin Smith would have been really in some trouble. Yeah. But overall, I really enjoyed it. It fit well together. If you were to sit down and watch them in succession, you really got something special there. That's a true, I guess, love note to the fan.
So let's do this. Let's take the 4 shows, and we'll say He-Man and She-Ra together as one versus being 2 shows. But let's take the 4 different versions of the show. How would you rank them against each other? And then also, how would we rank them in the pantheon of animated shows?
As far as
when I say rank them in that pantheon, it's not saying where would you put it, but like, hey, it would be in my top 10 or my top 5, or would it not be even make a top 100 or something? We don't have to find exactly where, because that would take me too long to figure out exactly where it falls.
Out of the four, I literally had them as the O2, Revelations, OG, and then Space Bullshit. That's
Really?
how I had them. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I would have still went with the originals first, just because that's what got me into them. I would have then probably said O2 and then Revelations and then New Adventures, just because New Adventures was terrible. But
Yeah, that's the bottom of the heap by far, and it's not like right. They're like, yes, just no, this is way down here,
and for
way down
everybody
here.
watching, this is our subjective list, so feel free to throw your opinions in as well. We'd love to hear them, but we're just shooting the bull on them. And same thing with the characters in a minute. We're going to talk about some characters, but feel free to share some of your favorites and some of your thoughts as well.
And as far as importance and significance, the OG, it's got to be right up there with your Transformers, your GI Joe. I mean, it's got to be, because it is the catalyst that truly kicked off, the 30-minute
Yeah.
cartoon that is, that done everything. I mean, it is what really got people fired up. I mean, it
If
had
I'm going,
record sales, ratings, everything for a good period of time.
if I'm going in the pantheon of all time animated shows, for this type of genre, right, or just animation in general, I say it's probably in the top five.
Oh, easily, easily.
Now,
I
we're in
can't
the top
disagree there.
five. That might be a debatable term, but it's top five one easily.
And let's be honest, if you were to take what they considered slipping rates at the time versus ratings today, it would smash 90% of the shit today still.
Probably so. And I would say that the 2000 show, I think it probably makes it at least the top 50 of all time, because you can't continue to have Masters of the Universe now if you hadn't had that show, because the way they went back and did the classics toy line when they started giving you that, they wove both of those universes together from the OG and that one to basically write the story and say this is who every character is, and that expanded everybody's collecting and made the folks who were now old enough to buy the high-end premium stuff go back and buy these and have the whole thing.
And the
Because
Four
you wouldn't have had
Horsemen,
that with both of those.
the Four Horsemen done an amazing job with that toy line, because they even made the ones you picked up at Walmart feel like, a Super 7 figure by today's standards, as far as just
Well, that's how Super 7.
great quality. Oh yeah,
Super
I
7's
understand.
designs are based off of those.
Yeah. I mean,
And honestly, they gave us characters that we never got. Some of my character stuff to talk about, and I'll go ahead and bring this up now, was not necessarily a favorite, but one that I remember from one of the very first episodes, even like the first 2 or 3 episodes, was Lizard Man. Never once got a figure until that classics line.
mm-hmm.
I was like, dude, he was in like one of the first episodes, but you never made him as a figure.
Dude, some of the figures to me that was the most fun were the more obscure ones, just like a Stinkor or Cyclone Roboto. I mean, characters that you didn't see every week or barely made a show at all, but they were just such cool figures.
Some of those didn't make the show at all, but we'll delve into those in a minute. But as far as the last 2 shows, I don't think New Adventures makes any list anywhere. You got to get to like the top 1,000 to even get that show somewhere in there. And Revelations,
I would probably put it just
too
above Barney and Friends.
Have you seen? By the way, have you seen the new Barney animated that they're making? He is horrifying looking.
I heard it on the radio today that he is app streamable, which is scary.
He's freaky looking because he's a 3D animated looking Barney. And it's creepy. Like it looks like it's like the thing of if you went to sleep and had a nightmare of Barney, that's what he would look like.
How far into the season did they get the transgender episode?
Well, I'm not even gonna bring that up because I actually read a comic the other day, and that was they made a point of constantly hitting on this one character that was transgender, written just for this book, and I'm like, why do y'all have to keep writing that every couple of sentences? And
why can't they just be a person?
Everybody had to kept saying it. Like one time, say, "Hey, this is who I am," and I move on, and they did that, and then 3 pages later, every other panel, somebody was commenting on it. I'm like, I'm so sick of seeing this in this book now. Jeez.
That's the problem with it. It's not just like this is a person, they're a hero or villain. It's just hammered and driven.
Yes, that's what happened here. But I digress. I don't know where to put Revelations in my stuff. I mean, I think it's good, but I don't think it makes a top 100 or anything. And it's too new, I guess. I don't know where to put it.
To me, it was just, like I said, that and the O2 show for me were like love letters to the fans. So I got them a little higher than probably what they should be, just for my personal preference, because of what, I can look back on the old show so lovingly, and while not remembering everything about it or it not holding up as well today, this makes that hold up to me.
Dude, I will say there was one fan service scene for me that just made everything for that He-Man, and it's in the last episode or next to last episode, last episode I think, when he comes jumping off of that Wind Raider into the middle of middle of all the oncoming hordes of shadow demons and just slicing them up, and then he tells that one woman, and he says, get to safe ground or whatever. She said, there is no safe. He said, oh, there's one. It's behind me. I was like, dang, that's He-Man there now.
He was a bad dude.
But since we're talking about him and we've been on the shows for a while, let's talk about some favorite characters. I've been talking for a bit, so I'm gonna let you name off some of yours, and I'll jump in on some of them, and I'll share some of mine that maybe you didn't have, and we can chat back and forth about some of them. Like, we won't spend too much time like a top 10 show, just because we won't have that much time. But let's delve into at least maybe why you like some of them, or any interesting facts about them.
Well, first we'll start out with my boy Hordak. You got to give Hordak some love. He's so much cooler looking than Skeletor, even though I am a Skeletor fan. But, I mean, bruh's arm could turn into a cannon. Come on. How cool is that?
He was menacing looking. I mean, Skeletor had a skeleton for a face, but he was always laughing, so it's kind of hard to take him menacingly.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't get a whole lot of laughter out of, Hordak, and you could tell he was very evil. Like I said, to me, as a kid, I guess because for whatever reason, around that time when I remember seeing Freddy for the first time. So in a lot of ways, they correlate with one another for me. I don't know why. But he had that cool villain vibe, like what a Freddy had. I guess is what to me. To where you could tell he was a badass dude. Like Skeletor, I love Skeletor, don't get me wrong. But, he was just, even though he had all the one-liners and he was just a hair above, some of the guys like Triclops or them. I mean, something to that effect. Hordak never seemed that way.
The biggest thing I liked about him was not only did he just lead an empire and stuff, but everybody wore his face as their logo. That was cool. Yeah. I was like, yeah, okay, you're not just a logo. You don't have just a logo like Cobra had a Cobra symbol. You are your army logo.
And that was what was cool in the O2 was like you realize he was actually the supreme badass over Skeletor or Keldor or however you want to put it. He was like the shit. So to me, he was always really, really cool. Roboto, like I said, touched on earlier.
Roboto was one of the ones I really liked. I thought he had a cool design.
Gears, inside of him. That was.
I don't think if I did
wow.
I think if I did a top 10, he would probably be an honorable mention and just miss it, just because there was some other characters I liked more, but he was really cool.
What a touching moment was that when he did die in Revelation. So
he had much more. I thought he had a better story arc than anything he did in Revelations than in the old show. The old show, he was just kind of there as another teammate occasionally.
When he would call him father, it was like, oh man, it hit me in the old feels. I ain't gonna lie. To me, Triclops don't really get enough love. As a figure, I remember as a figure as a kid, just that was the coolest shit ever. Like him and Manny Faces, the fact that you had that option of, changing their, visuals was just so cool to me.
Manny is one of those I liked. Again, he would have fell off of a top 10 for me just because of other characters, but I thought he was really, really cool. He'd have been an honorable mention. He didn't get enough screen time, I didn't feel like. If he'd had a more fleshed out story, maybe I would have been even more engaged with him, I guess.
Who would you say is probably, just toy line wise, who is your favorite probably toy besides He-Man out of the Masters line?
Snout Spout.
Wow, okay. You hit that fast too.
I had 3, and all 3 of these were on my list of characters to talk about. He-Man, obviously being my absolute favorite. But Snout Spout and Zodak were my other 2 that were like, no questions asked, that's top 3 characters for me. Snout Spout had no lines on the show that I can remember. I know he was on one She-Ra episode, and it might have even been a special or something where they crossed over with He-Man. But Nothing else besides that, but he was just such a cool toy to me with that elephant head and the squirting action out of the nose. I don't know, for whatever reason he was one of those for me. And Zodak, he was ambiguous as to whether he was good or bad on the old shows. He did different stuff. But I like the fact that he rode around that little Mobius chair type thing, and he was so powerful. I mean, he's a cosmic enforcer, and there was times where you wonder, is this dude as powerful as He-Man and the Sorceress? Because he's just the way they played his character, and he had the coolest look to me. So I've always been, that's my top 3 out of anything. So I'm always on top of them.
Dude, I want to be honest. Too bad, for whatever reason, I just remember this being the coolest figure as a kid.
Have you seen the new one?
I actually haven't.
I saw him in Target today, the Masterverse one, where he's the new one. He's nice, really nice.
Really, I may have to go in for him. He was always just like a guilty pleasure. And I remember getting him as a kid. Like literally, I'd done something at school noteworthy. Some other, took me to the TGNY, and she got me too bad, and it was just the coolest thing, because I mean, even though his arms were like positioned weird back then, because they stood up like this.
Yeah.
He had the 2 heads, and it was like, I don't know, it was just like, dude, it was like, oh, it's almost like you had 2 figures in one.
So you brought up the TGNY. That's actually where my mom worked when I was that age, and He-Man was coming out. So I got a bunch of them from there, but I remember one in particular I got from there, and this was one of those ones that I was really big on in the show too. But I was sitting in the car window, because when you were a kid, you wanted to climb up in the window and sit like halfway hanging out of it.
Yeah.
Fell out of it, hit my head, was crying. So the one I got that day, there was a Cyclone.
Okay. He was always very fun.
The radar chest, and you could spin him around, and I don't remember him that much on the old show, maybe 1 or 2 times, but I remember him being really a standout character in the 2000s at the show.
Yeah, I remember him more from the 2000 show than I do the OG. I do know, I remember seeing him as a child on the show, but he was just such a cool figure, because you could get him to start spinning him around, and it was just like,
even though they just reused He-Man's head and put a little ring of Saturn around it. He was still cool. I actually still have his original figure somewhere.
You weren't supposed to notice this. How cool was Rio Grande? What was his name? Rio Grande?
Rio Grande?
He had that guy. He had the chest piece that fell down with the guns and they come out of the legs. See, I never actually had that one, but I remember seeing him with Josh's.
I don't remember if I had him either. I know Josh did, and I wanted him, but I want to get him in their Classics line, and I've seen him a couple times. I actually picked him up for Josh once in the Classics line, but I still haven't bought him myself, even though I want him. He was one of those I thought was so cool, but I was like, he came later on. He was never in the show or anything. He was just a figure, and he might have been in the comics, but man, he was so cool, and he had that cowboy. So it's kind of like they were trying to mix their Brave Star into their He-Man.
Well, okay, let me ask you this then. Okay, there's 1,000 different He-Men. Which version of He-Man was your favorite?
So if I'm going with toy wise, because I wanted to look like the show the Super 7 one is, the Filmation style one they did. Mm-hmm. But if I'm going with the old toys, I like the Battle Armor He-Man better, just because you could spin the chest with the battle damage.
That was cool. That was cool. I actually have the Super 7 on that. That's what sucks. My collection is strode all out. I was kind of looking around for a few things before the show, and it's like, because I have the Sword of Power. It's big, adult size sword. And I have the Battle Armor He-Man and Skeletor, and the original Skeletor all Super 7, they're at my fiance's house. Because my collection is between 2 counties. But dude, for me, it's Thunder Punch by far.
He was cool looking.
It was a great look, and then you had the caps in the back too that just did a. So every time he put more hands on the Skeletor, it popped. That was cool.
The only one I never liked was the laser sword He-Man. The one where he was wearing armor and he had then the sword, the power was like turned green. It was like laser power He-Man.
I don't remember that one.
I can't remember exactly his name. It was like laser He-Man, and then there was the Skeletor that came out around the same time as the Thunder Punch He-Man. Wasn't that the Terror Claw one?
Yeah, there was also one where he had this little dragon thing that spit water. That was
Yes.
like terrible. The dragon
Yeah.
almost looked cool, but it looked very awkward positioned on him.
Yeah, so there's a laser light He-Man and a laser light Skeletor, and I just do not like these at all. That they had them as the originals, and the only picture I can find right now, just browsing on my phone while we're talking, is the one from the Classics line. But yeah, it's not. They've actually made these in the originals as well. So looking at some of my other characters as well. So I'll give you another one that was never on the show. Absolute favorite of mine, makes the top 5 because I got it when I had the flu. And I was just sick, and my mom picked it up for me, and just for whatever reason, I thought it was like the coolest gimmick because this was like the first stretchy character that had like you could extend him, but it was Extendar. He had a little shield, the triangular shield that folded out to get bigger, and he could extend his neck and his head and stuff.
I do.
I actually have him in the Classics line as well. In the Classics, I've got him, Zodak, the Super 7 He-Man, Snout Spout, and Standor, where they made the Stan Lee tribute character.
I remember these laser characters now that you just sent me that. So people, when you see me stare away, I'm not always being an asshole. I'm sometimes looking at things Monster sends me.
We can see it in your glasses sometimes. Like I can see this one reflecting in your glasses.
Yeah, so I remember those now. I do.
Yeah, they were terrible to me. I just didn't like them.
Yeah, I'm not a super big fan of that right there either.
I'm going to tag on to Extendar too, because I shouldn't have said he was the first one to extend, because one of my other favorite characters today. Yes. He would make my top 10 for sure. I loved Mechanic.
He was one of my favorites, and I remember having both of those figures and making them battle, because I just felt like because they both extended, they had to do battle with one another. I don't know why, but they did.
So, was there any other? Who was some of the other standout ones for you? Because I know I just did a couple of them there.
Dude, I like the Beast Man. Not so much. I enjoyed him on the show because he was goofy then, and I was little. But as just a figure, he was always very cool looking to me.
He was.
And, I always would pretend he was like Lord of the Beast and whatnot. I mean, my Beast Man when I was playing was a lot more menacing. And then when Grizzor come out, he would rule over him and make him do shit.
How horrible was that Grizzlor figure though, with the hair being so wild you couldn't even see the figure under there?
You've seen his face and arms. That was it. And the face was questionable sometimes.
So speaking of flocked figures, basically is what we'll call them, since he was flocked. What about the other?
I know where you're going.
Big flocked figure.
Moss Man.
Yes. I had that Moss Man that was flocked, and I will tell you that I loved the character. But God, that thing smelled so bad. After like a day or two out of the plastic, oh.
Yep. It did, because it was supposed to have that moss-like smell.
But when you first opened it, the plastic had been on it so long it smelled like the plastic. So I was like, yeah. Yep. But after like 2 or 3 days, it was rank, man.
Yeah, I remember trying to wash mine because he smelled bad. So I had the bright idea of young Hassel took him and was going to wash him. But that didn't work.
What's bad though is he's another one of those characters I think is really integral to a lot of the show, and especially the later shows and the comics and stuff. I don't remember him as much in the original show. I remember him some, but as integral as he was to all the stuff, he still wouldn't make my top 10.
I did like how they kind of made it more like Swamp Thing in the O2 show.
Yeah,
that was really cool. Like part of the Eternia and all that. That was pretty cool.
Matter of fact, his nemesis Evil Seed never got a figure until the Classics line.
Really?
Yeah, he was his nemesis on the old show, but he never got a figure until the Classics line was done.
Wasn't he one of the very early villains in the first show?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just like Lizard Man never being made. It's just fun facts. It's like, oh, well, why did you skip those? Well, we just did.
What about this cat that don't get enough love?
Faker.
Yeah. I was always really drawn to him, but I do not remember him in the show.
He was in the show.
I don't really remember it.
He was in the show, but he didn't look like that. So that was one of my complaints. Like, he was that blue skin figure they made. Yeah. But in the show, because they wanted to have the fake He-Man to actually look like He-Man, it was just a He-Man with glowing eyes.
Well, see, I remember that there. I do remember that.
That was supposed to be Faker in the chest
and all that stuff, but we never got the blue version of him, what I'm saying.
Yeah,
so I was just like,
got that on the show. But at the same time,
I was a little let
if he's
down.
Going to be an evil double of He-Man, if he is blue, you can't really It's not like you couldn't distinguish that.
Hey, these people, this man had a pink sort of power. They never realized it was the same thing. I'm just saying.
But on the show, the sword looked exactly the same.
Exactly. And no one ever picked up on this. No
Like
one.
the whole Clark Kent with glasses thing.
Hey, did you see the meme I shared the other day of the chick that's typically got the bangs and the glasses?
Yeah.
And then she cut her hair, or she grew her hair out and took the glasses off and was like, who the fuck is this girl?
Well,
there you go.
that's the other thing with just a quick aside with Superman though. When he does put on the glasses to be Clark stuff, he actually slouches over. He walks differently. He changes his gait. He does everything to make it not him. So
He's just big corn pone by then.
yeah. But since we're running a little bit closer on time, who are some of the other call outs you got? And if we've got any fun facts or stuff, we'll touch on some of them.
I've done pretty well hit on my Trap Jaw. I missed out on Trap Jaw. He was an amazing figure because you could kind of change the things on his arm. I really liked that.
Yeah, that was cool.
His jaw moved, which was revolutionary at the time. Then he had like the little harpoon thing or whatever, the string. I mean, he had a lot of accessories that was just super cool that I remember back in the day. It was like you could really sell young Hassel with these sort of things. Like,
yeah,
it's like, oh, this is cool. Because I mean, hell, we didn't have a lot of toys with that shit back then.
So, sorry, go ahead. I won't interrupt the rest of your list if you had some more on there.
No, that's pretty much. I made a short list. I mean, I got two that's most hated.
Who is that?
My number one most hated is Orko.
I didn't mind Orko, but I could do without him.
I hate him in the show. He's a menace and a nuisance.
Until Revelations, then God bless, he was badass.
Then they made me fucking have feelings for this son of a bitch, but still. The figure with the little rollies on the bottom.
I didn't mind that as much.
It was terrible.
I liked how the original of that character was packaged with Prince Adam, I think, in a special. Like it wasn't, you could still buy him on a separate card, but he was packaged special for that. And then when they did the classics line, they flipped it and made Orko, and then Prince Adam is laying in the bottom of the tray. And that was the only way you got Prince Adam in the classics line.
Okay, that's actually pretty cool then. My other most hated, and it's not because it was just shit. It was just because it did not look like what it was supposed to with Snake Mountain.
That
Snake
was a
Mountain
weird looking little face on Snake Mountain.
Looks nothing like what you got on the show, other than the little microphone thing or the little roundabout. There's nothing about this that looks like Snake Mountain.
What about the one face on Snake Mountain that looks like a Fraggle Rock?
Or really meffed up Mr. Snuffleupagus. I mean, it's just like, what the fuck what were you people on?
Oh, Lord.
This is terrible. It's not Snake Mountain.
So,
I remember my dad bought me that for my birthday one year. He come by and I had, Castle Grayskull, and I said, oh, it's Snake Mountain. So I done pulled my Grayskull out and I'm putting it together. And the more I'm putting it together, the more disappointed I'm starting to look. Because there's nothing like what I had envisioned.
Yeah, I had Grayskull myself, and it was pretty cool. But just as a quick rattle off, I'll tell you a couple other characters I had on my list of ones I really like. Stratos was always cool to me. I always liked him. I thought he had a great part in all the shows he's been in. I was disappointed he wasn't in Revelations, really, because he was such an integral part of the crew. Also, along with him was Buzz Off, because I same thing, just he was always there. I liked them, and they were cool. She-Ra, I said earlier, she was my favorite coming out of that show, but I had one other that you may or may not remember. You remember Rock-On?
I do.
One of the rock people. I thought those were so cool because
the Rock Lords
kind of
they were cool as hell. I like them.
Well, they weren't Rock Lords though; they were Rock people because Rock Lords was GoBots.
You know what I'm saying.
But I liked how they could cover themselves up and turn into the rock stuff for whatever reason. That was really cool. And did you notice every toy line had to make a rock character? You had the Rock Lords and GoBots. You had the Rock-On here. Rock-On, Stone Dar, and Granita was on He-Man.
It was almost like you still stayed with your initial line, but you got a Transformer at the same time. It's like a combination. And I think everybody tried to piggyback on that transforming kick that was just really, really taking the U.S. by storm at the time.
And I'll tell you, if I was doing a top 10 list, Rockon would probably be either honorable mention or he would make it because it was just a cool concept. And he was the one I liked the most out of those 3 rock characters they had. I also remember the meteorbs or whatever they were called that turned into animals. I think they were mostly from She-Ra. I was not a fan of those as much. But I do want to hit on one character before we move to Nerd Out because we're getting close on time. But one character you mentioned earlier, and I think he might have had a flocked version as well, but Stinkor. Fun fact, Stinkor was never on the show originally.
No.
He was never on the original show. He came out actually after the show was ending.
He wasn't originally flocked. I think the O2 line done a flocked version.
That might have been. I can't remember.
I know the original version did have the odor because like you opened him out of the pack and it was like. Ugh.
But it was funny to me that he was like a cult favorite and one of everybody's favorite Skeletor henchmen, but he was never on the show. And they actually had a story for him. They used it in the 2000 show, but he was never put in the old show because it was ending by the time he came out.
He made my list of faves.
He was cool. That's actually the only one that my kiddo has gotten into was him. I was like, out of all the new ones they're making, he's like, I want Stinkor. He looks cool. Okay.
He did. He had a badass gear, and then he just had a great look to him.
Yeah.
Well, the evil flocked villain from back then was the Panther.
Oh yeah, I remember him too. But with that, since we're running tighter on time, we'll go straight into Nerd Out. For anybody who hasn't been here before, this is where we ask each other random questions about the topic of the day. You have to respond with no prep time. If you want to provide your answers in the comments, we'd love to hear that. Or if you just want to expand on some of the ones we said, we'd love to hear that as well. But I think that's kind of explained all of it. But Hassel, you want to go first or you want me to go first this week?
It's your turn, buddy. I've been going first, and I'm not prepared this week.
All right, so I'm going to ask you one because we got in, 86, 87, we got that horrible Masters of the Universe Dolph Lundgren. I say horrible because it doesn't hold up, but I will still sit down and watch it. But it has nothing to do with the show other than the names of the characters.
Pretty much.
Honestly. So if they were remaking a new live action movie based on the old show, more closely related to the cartoon series, we're going to say that just for the sake of we want it to be more in line with how the cartoon was. It doesn't have to be exactly like it, but connect to it more than that movie did, which that movie could have been named anything and probably been the same. Who would you want to see play He-Man? Because he's the central character.
I think the best thing to do is choose who would fit Adam the best. CGI is much more advanced and it's along the lines to me to where you no longer have to pick this muscle man that looks like The Rock to play He-Man. You pick a good Adam and you can CG Mark Ruffalo this bitch to look like the Hulk.
That's an interesting take. I went the complete opposite direction.
Well, I mean, the cheap version will be to do that because there's going to be so much effects. But let's face it, if you do He-Man and do it justice, it's going to be a big budget special effects movie. So
right.
I choose to put my money in someone I can relate to and have sympathy in as Adam, and that you can carry over CGI wise as the actor for the He-Man. And I still don't want He-Man to be ridiculously big now. Just
no, because
you do your visual effects enough to where it looks like he's buffed, but
But his power was all magical power. He doesn't have to be overly large. And he really wasn't on the show. He was about the same size as a lot of the other characters. They really didn't change their drawing style between characters.
No, everybody just trained, prayed, and ate their vitamins back then, apparently, because they were all in like jacked shape. Even King Randor's old ass.
So I would have went in the opposite direction from what you said. I would have actually said, let's actually do two separate people playing the characters. Mm-hmm. But I have an interesting way of doing that, and I have one that really fits He-Man, and I think that the other people, the other choices that could play Adam would fit, because to me, I would say make Chris Hemsworth be He-Man. He can, and now let's not do the silly Thor. Let's do the serious Thor, like he was in Infinity War or in the first Thor movie or the second one, where he was much more serious. have him as He-Man because he's big enough and buff enough to do it, but not overly large. And then just take one of his younger brothers and have them be Prince Adam. So
That's a very interesting take.
They're
Yeah, 'cause
actually
they look.
smaller than he is, but they're not out of shape by any means. But they're smaller than him, and they look similar enough that when he changes, okay, he looks slightly different, but not. He's still in the same family, so they look similar, but he's gotten a lot more size to him if you go that route. Because him compared to Liam or his other brother, whose name I cannot remember, they're not as big as he is, and they could actually
No.
look like they're related or the same person, but a different version of that person.
And I'm choosing Tom Holland as my Adam. It just come to me.
That would be he would be good as Adam, but man, a CGI big him would be weird looking to me.
But I'm thinking you change the facial features just a bit. I mean, it's
You'd have to, yeah, but yeah,
the bigger question is who's Skeletor?
Dude, man, because you got to have a good voice for him.
Yes, sir.
So there's, and I don't know the dude's name off the top of my head. I would tell you a couple of choices. I like Giancarlo Esposito just because he can be so evil to be Skeletor, but his voice doesn't match it to me. But there's a guy who was in he was in the Resident Evil movie or the TV show that was on Netflix. He has such a deep, menacing voice. He plays like a lot of animated shows. He's like a dragon and stuff, usually because of his voice. And if I can remember, if I'll find his name in a second, but he would be my Skeletor, at least from a voice perspective.
Well, he's another one that would just primarily be CG, anyways. Dude, I really don't know. I'm kind of because. I almost want my Skeletor to still have that, but to be really evil while doing it.
So the guy's name,
Brad Dourif could probably pull off a really good Skeletor.
I don't know who that is.
The voice of Chucky.
Okay. The guy I was looking at is Lance Reddick. I'm trying to think of some other stuff he's been in as well. I'm trying to hit on this here just to see, but he was in John Wick. He was he's the guy at the hotel who runs the hotel in John Wick.
Runs the Continental. Okay, yeah. I know who you're talking about.
The older African American, the African American gentleman. His voice is so menacing as Skeletor.
Okay, I got that. I could get a vibe out of that. If I were gonna go with a deep voice, I'd go Tony Todd, and that would be my Hordak.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
But that covers my question. What would you have for a question this week?
Okay. What figure would you like to see Super 7 do that they have not done?
That's hard because Mattel did so many before Super 7 took that line.
But Super 7, they do a lot better job. I mean, I'm not knocking the Origins line or anything, or the Revelations line now, because they do a great job, and it's
if you want a budget
affordable price. Yeah.
What I'd like to see them do, because I don't think they have done it, is just do a Filmation version of either Zodak or Snout Spout, so I could have the actual animated looking version. Because even the classics, looking over there at them, they're based on the toy line. They're not based on the actual show or the Filmation, because like Zodak, the old toy line had like fin looking stuff coming off of his, like Batman type stuff coming off of his wrist and all, and that was not on that show.
Okay. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. I'm trying to think of who I would, because I mean they've done so many. Because every time I think one comes to mind, I was like, shit, I think they've done that one.
Yeah, that's where I was at for a minute, but I need Filmation versions of a couple of them.
I don't think they've done a Tongue Lasher.
I thought they did a Filmation Tongue Lasher actually,
but I want an updated one. It's got the detail that they did with a lot of their other. Because they've done different versions of a lot of them, which is what I think they're going to try to do with their Ninja Turtle line. It's just they've exhausted those, so now everybody's going to be glowy.
They actually, Super 7 did a Classics Tongue Lasher. He's the Filmation style.
Did they?
Yeah. I was.
But only the Filmation.
They did only Filmation, but I think Mattel may have done the toy version of him.
Well then,
I don't know that for certain though, but I'm looking for it now as we are speaking. That's an interesting one though. Yeah. Yes, Mattel did the tongue lasher, the actual toy version of him.
okay, I
The
see
classics
that.
line. And he's much more buff than and different looking than the. He looks much different between that and his animated look.
Yeah, I want the purple and black or the purple on purple version.
Yeah.
Whereas you got the sparks coming out and all that shit. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, and I don't know what features this because I don't like the way this classics ones look from Mattel, but
That
I
looks
like it.
like trash, to be honest.
Yeah,
I
it
don't
looks a
remember
little
that
off.
look for him.
That's
Okay,
the one they did, but with that, we have been going for close to our time. So before we get out of here, though, let's give a shout out to some of our friends. Mr. Daniel Garcia is first up. He's creator of Zyber Ronin. That's coming out pretty soon. You can find him on Facebook at Daniel Garcia and on Instagram at D Garcia Comics. Make sure you check there as well as back here for any news and updates on when Zyber Ronin's come out, as well as some of his other projects he's working on. Don't forget about our friend Mr. Chris Daly, the host of Fueled by Weird podcast. You can find him on Instagram at Fueled by Weird and on his podcast Fueled by Weird, wherever you find your podcast. He discusses all things nerdy and weird and gives great reviews. Our Canadian friend and content creator and autism activist, Miss Mandy Lynn, aka Kushi Mama. You can find her on Instagram at Kushi Mama and on YouTube at Doodle's Toy Report. And just as a shout out right now, I think she's looking for some folks to come on and join her for some toy talks coming up pretty soon. So if you're interested in that, check her Instagram and hit her up. Mr. August Aguilar from Strange Film Studios. Remember, keep an eye out for He Comes to Kill, which is out there now, and he's got another project in the works, and he's been putting out quite a few podcasts lately, so check him out. And then don't forget our extended Nerdy Manroom family member, Mr. Big Rob. You can find him on his channel, Big Rob's House of Entertainment and No Chinese Food.
Yeah.
I didn't know where you were going with it this week. He drops new reviews and unboxings of awesome items and shares stories from life on the road that only Big Rob tends to encounter. And remember, while you're checking out all of our friends, go check out our sponsor, These Own Collectibles. You can find them on the internet at theseowncollectibles@gmail.com and on Facebook at These Own Collectibles or in their store at 305 Main Street, Tifton, Georgia. Visit them for all your nerdy needs. Help them support the local artist community by supporting their cause of bringing unity through community. Fandoms unite. And I forgot to do this when we were discussing Big Rob, but I owe him a big shout out because he actually filled out my G.I. Joe shelves by sending me a retro card gung ho in the correct uniform, which is what I was waiting on. So appreciate that, Big Rob.
Joe is there.
But before we get out of here, Hassel, why don't you tell everybody where they can find us as well?
Man, why don't y'all people go show us some love? Go over to YouTube, check us out, find us at the Nerdy Man Room Show, like, click, subscribe, share. You can find us on Roku at Southern Joy Media. You can find us on Facebook at Hassel Hutchison via the Nerdy Man Room Show. You can find us on Instagram at the Nerdy Man Room Show and at Twitter, Nerdy MR Show.
And that brings us to a close today, but join us here next time because we have an interview. Actually, next couple of weeks, we've got some pretty good interviews coming up, but the one next week is with Mr. Anders Ericsson. Did I say that right, Hassel?
You did. You have Nightmare Studio or Nightmare Gloves
and Trick or Treat Studios.
There you go.
See, I had the rest of it. I just want to make sure I said his name right.
you got me tongue twisted by the end of it.
Until then, everyone, live nerdy by the power of Grayskull.